So next up, we have Harry Saville. Now, I was on a webinar earlier this year, which was presented by Lexic and covered the experience that that organisation has in terms of the transport sector specifically, but everything that they do is to support people to have more neuro-inclusive workplaces. So I am really interested to hear from Harry in relation to just giving us some context. And again, Harry's brief from me has been practical stuff. Please, Harry, tell us what we can go away and do differently. I'm going to hand over to you to take us through your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Nina. And yeah, it's great to hear Ian's experiences and what he's implemented already in his organisation. So hopefully today I'll be going through, what neurodiversity is and the value it adds to the transport industry. And I'm sure I'll be echoing a lot of the messages that Ian's already mentioned. So it'll be good to kind of share what I think is good practice and relate that back to what Ian's put in place already. So a bit about myself. As Nina's mentioned already, I've been working in this area for about in the field of neurodiversity for about 6 years now. So in workplace psychology, 6 years. Started off doing a lot of one-to-one coaching and assessments for neurodiversity and wellbeing in the workplace before moving more to this organisational change. So thinking about what organisations can do differently to be more neuro-inclusive in the first instance, more of that proactive support. So it's good to hear a lot of what Ian was mentioning. There's a lot of what we recommend in a lot of our consultations, which has led me to Lexic as well. So a bit about Lexic. We are an organisation that helps try and build neuro-inclusivity across organisations, whether it be in our team, consultation capacity, looking at training such as workshops and webinars, developing e-learning solutions, so looking at kind of the value of neurodiversity, manager support, helping them understand kind of different kind of diagnosis and what they can do differently for adjustments, consulting on internal policies, procedures, etc. But also we have our one-to-one branch of psychologists or usually occupational psychologists, all trained to help with kind of one-to-one assessments and coaching as well. So we kind of cover those end-to-end solutions. So yeah, very happy to be with you all here today to discuss kind of how that relates to the transport industry. So first of all, thinking about neurodiversity, I've got attention deficit hyperactivity disorder here as an example, just to demonstrate here kind of what we're moving away from when we talk about neurodiversity. So in the past, we've often spoken about neurodiversity in terms of this deficit model, which, as you can see here, thinks about neurodiversity as more of a kind of learning difficulty, learning disability, specific learning difficulty, maybe seeing kind of normal way of thinking, a disordered way of thinking, the right way of thinking, the wrong way of thinking. Even within ADHD itself, the name has a couple of negative connotations included, deficit and disorder. So this model is very much focusing on kind of the challenges people experience, and really not talking about the flip side of that narrative, which is all the strengths and benefits and value they add to organisations, and a lot of kind of strengths people who are neurodiverse will feel that they bring to their role, which is where neurodiversity really comes in. So this is our lexic wheel of neurodiversity, not completely fully encompassing of all neurodivergent diagnosis, but some of the most common ones there. So neurodiversity really refers to just different ways, human variety in how we process information. And it's also used as this umbrella term here for diagnoses such as dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD, autism spectrum condition, to name a few. So the benefits of this really is that it's, I think, first of all, thinking about this as more of a spectrum as well, which helps you, even within diagnosis, helps you see kind of the individual aspects of how this might present for different individuals. It is very much a spectrum of a complex spectrum of different characteristics, different strengths, different challenges. Even with the same diagnosis, there may be some commonalities, but maybe some differences in how in the characteristics people experience, and that might differ depending on just themselves, but also the situation they're in and the role they're in. Similarly, people might have dual diagnosis, they might have multiple diagnoses. For example, someone might be dyslexic and dyspraxic, someone might be have ADHD and autism spectrum condition, which all kind of feeds into how that might present for that individual. So a really key message we always try and reiterate is that it's really good to know about different diagnoses and different characteristics might be associated with them. But a really key message you can take away, whether if you're a manager or in the recruitment team, is to not make any assumptions about what someone might be experiencing. It's a very individual experience. The best thing you can do is actively listen to individual circumstances. You might have also noticed that we've got mental health conditions sort of wrapped around the outside there. So we're not mentioning there that mental health is related to neurodiversity or is part of neurodiversity. They're very separate conversations. So in neurodiversity, we're talking about differences in how people process information. Mental health is mental health. It's a health condition. Very separate conversation. But the reason why we've included it here is just to highlight the kind of co-occurrences we see. You can often see there's research out there that shows this high co-occurrences of mental health challenges with neurodiversity. That a lot of the reasons why we argue that would be is due to that lack of support and maybe due to discrimination we see in the workplace. So it kind of highlights the importance of changes you can make, whether it be in recruitment or what you do on a daily basis in the workplace as well, to help create neuro-inclusive environments. Not only just to help people really thrive and be as productive as they can and really tap into those skills, but also from a well-being perspective, manage people's well-being, which is really important. Similar to how kind of those characteristics might present, it might be the same with language as well. So when you're having those conversations, how people might identify as being neurodivergent or having a neurodifference is very different. People might use person-first language, they might use identity-first language, such as I am dyslexic or I have dyslexia. They might refer to being neurodivergent or having a neurodifference, whereas many don't. As many people don't see it as being a disability, some people might say it as disabling, and that's totally valid as well. So there's lots of different varieties in how people might refer to their neurodifference. So include that in that conversation, and just kind of asking them how they identify with that is really valuable. Little question for you here now. So please, good to see what you put in the chat. Do you know how many individuals in the UK and Ireland have a neurodifference? A few answers there. Is it 1 in 10, 1 in 30, 1 in 7, or 1 in 100? So good to hear your thoughts. There's a lot for C. 1 in 7, a few for A. Bit of a mixed bag. Yeah, a few for C. 1 for A. So lots of people thinking 1 in 10 or 1 in 7. So the official answer, according to ACAS, this is from 2017, is that it's 1 in 7. So that's about 15%. You can see the breakdown of what that might look like across diagnosis as well. You could argue as well, I think we've seen as time has gone on as well, as awareness changes, as the stigma from that deficit model is broken away. As we're talking more about the positive side of neurodiversity, people feel more comfortable talking about it, identifying those different thinking styles. There's lots of people now who suggest maybe that could be more 1 in 5 or 20% of the population. So you can see that's constantly evolving statistic. And I think if you think about your workplace and how many people that might mean as being who could be neurodiverse, and if even outside of your organizations, thinking about those who want to access that workplace, who are struggling to do so. So you can already start thinking about what do we need to do to make our recruitment practices more inclusive, because that's a very high number of people. So you can start thinking, you can start seeing the significance of making that neuro-inclusive. And there's lots of reasons why organizations are starting to try and be more neuro-inclusive and tap into those different skill sets, because of the vast variety of value and skills that neurodivergent individuals bring to the workplace. Try to summarize that here in a little graphic. Often you might see, for example, with dyslexia, kind of linked with creativity, innovation, entrepreneurial skills, outside the box thinking. Some research that shows that 35% of entrepreneurs attribute their success to dyslexia or having a diagnosis of dyslexia or dyslexic thinking. You may have seen on LinkedIn they've added dyslexic thinking as a skill you can add, which is really good, kind of flipping that narrative away from the stereotyped just challenges of the reading and writing and more towards the positives. ADHD, you see that hyper focus, especially with deadlines or working under pressure, or areas of high interest, kind of energetic, kind of creating really positive atmospheres in the workplace. Spontaneity, kind of being more adaptable, and also creative as well, kind of being that kind of thinking in different off the beaten path thinking style can lead to more creative ideas as well. And lastly, maybe autism, often associated with kind of logical, analytical thinking, high attention to detail, honest communication. So there's lots of skills there that organisations are really starting to tap into. It's kind of echoed through some examples here. So EY kind of talking about the future skills, the skills for the future, and what we really need to be looking at are the skills we teach people in school, and really what's valuable. And, like, for example, sitting still for long periods, writing with nice joint-like handwriting. In a world of AI automation, I think I've heard about AI more in the last 3 months than I have in a long time. So I think it's becoming more part of our lives. Are those skills about creative, innovative ideas, problem solving? Are they the skills that are more valuable for future organisations? And how do we future-proof ourselves for that? And that applies fully for the rail industry and the transport industry as well. It's echoed here as well. Harvard Business Review talking about neurodiversity as that competitive advantage. So looking at the gaps that we see or the gaps in talent in certain areas, is something that organisations are really trying to tap into. To summarise there, really kind of seeing that increases in productivity received from individuals who really have tried to tap into those neurodivergent skills. Where they've created neurodiversity and work programs such as JP Morgan Chase, for example. They had their autism work program, had a side-by-side comparison with a neurotypical team, and found with the right flexible way, offering the right flexible ways of working, the right adjustments, they would be able to be much more productive. More innovation, more creative skills, diverse skill sets, better problem solving, better decision making, increases in well-being. If you create that kind of neuro-inclusion for neurodiverse individuals, you create more kind of psychological safety for all, kind of helping to create a safer place for everyone to work, which is what we want to aim for. There's lots of benefits to any organisation, let alone the transport industry. So how does this relate to transport? That's the big question. First of all, looking from a customer perspective, I think some of the challenges you might consider if you look through kind of the barriers that might be in the transport industry. First of all, maybe the accessibility of the services, kind of accessing transport, buying tickets, journey planning, etc. Is there website accessibility? Is kind of text in a neuro-inclusive format? Is it easy to process? Is there options for screen readers or assistive technology? Something that Ian mentioned before, adding that assistive technology to websites, for example. Is that available to help it be kind of accessible to neurodivergent individuals who want to access the rail industry or the transport industry? If you think about sensory sensitivity, something that Ian touched on as well, in terms of public transport, and for example, anywhere in transport, in stations or in bus stations, etc. Thinking that feeling of being uncomfortable for some individuals in crowded spaces, those sensory sensitivities of, or maybe sort of large quantities of people, a lot more sounds, the impact of certain lighting, maybe the impact of patterns on certain seating, etc. That will feed into kind of making people feel uncomfortable or overwhelmed in accessing those services. It may lead to kind of that overwhelm, that anxiety, that stress about accessing your customers accessing transport industries or kind of public transport. So as a really good analogy, I saw in an article recently looking at kind of, for example, using the London Underground as an example. If you think about a statistic about it being 1 in 7 individuals who are neurodivergent, if you think about, for example, one of the London Underground train lines, maybe like the Jubilee line, just shutting down, think about the loss of passengers, that would be the impact that would have on on the transport, the transport in London, the number of customers, number of employees, the talent that's not accessing the services. So what can we do differently? First of all, thinking about that formatting, screen readers and websites, sensory sensitivities. Could you add more like quieter spaces, quieter coaches, for example? Could you think about the lighting that's been used in those environments? So yeah, lots of little things there to consider. Thinking about employees as well, we link back to the skills that we saw are really valuable from neurodiversity or neurodivergent individuals, and what the value that might add to the transport industry. Think of, first of all, kind of that innovation, problem solving. So neurodivergent people might be able to see alternative possibilities for how to use maybe existing infrastructure, maybe necessary, especially in the rail industry, and have additional insights into the impact of introducing maybe new technologies. It might be easier as well to kind of create environments that empower those who already think differently, have those different thought processes, who can add those new innovative ideas, as opposed to just investing heavily in those system changes. Thinking about kind of verbal processing and rapport building. You often see that with those with dyslexia. I know loads of people I've worked with who are dyslexic, they're very good at kind of verbal processing, communicating verbally, rapport building, problem solving that way. So it can lead to a lot better customer service. So those in those particular roles, kind of getting better customer satisfaction, increased in people getting what they need from the services. Maybe having preferences for routines and structure may help with creating systems and following kind of procedures and timetables. That hyper focus, again, helping with kind of working with under high pressure or tight deadlines. Data analysis, recognizing patterns, help driving future change or updates, or seeing where things can be improved. Also, if there's high passion in the area of transport, can lead to kind of remarkable levels of knowledge in those areas and passion, especially in areas of passion and interest. So lots of things there could be really valuable to tap into. So how do we do that? What do we often see in the recruitment industry? So in terms of recruitment, so we've mentioned kind of how there's value there in terms of neurodiversity in the workplace. But according to some research we saw in one of our, we put together one of our blogs recently looking at the neurodiversity in transport. So it's from the City and Guilds and the National Skills Academy for Rail. They found that the systemic issues in the industry's talent and skills pipeline have created a shortage of trained and talented employees, especially when you need it most. I think with the demand on skills expected to peak around 2025. So Ian, I think you mentioned some statistics around autism in the workplace and amount of those not accessing work, and that's something we've seen as well, and something we've anecdotally heard of. Qualitatively from people we work with or coach and have assessments with. There's plenty of people I've spoken to who say, I know I can do this role, I know I've got the skills for this role, but I really struggle to get through that recruitment process or interviews. I really don't do well in them. I think that can be a problem with recruitment, not just in transport, but across the board. I think there's this, there can be some rigid, old-fashioned things systems put in place that can exclude a lot of individuals, especially neurodivergent people. So if we look at each of these stages, what could we do differently to help be neuro-inclusive? I think first step before we look at these is, what do we do to attract neurodivergent candidates to apply in the first place? And something that Ian touched on there as well, kind of mentioning sharing what you're doing to become more neuro-inclusive is really important. So sharing what you're doing with networks, sharing what adjustments are available, sharing how you understand the value of neurodiversity. If you think about, for any of us, if we're applying for a new role, if you're maybe a graduate looking to apply into the transport industry, the first thing you're going to do, especially from a neurodiversity perspective, is maybe find out what their stance is, kind of what their programs are in terms of being neuro-inclusive. So sharing that will really help people see that it's a safe place for them to apply. You're going to get those applications before you even get to the job description. Are you attracting the right people? So that's really important. After that, if we look at each of these stages, the job descriptions, application process, assessments, onboarding, for me, the really key part here is how do we add flexibility to each of these stages, and moving away from mindset of catching people out and more towards how do we just get people to give people a safe place to be able to demonstrate their skills and make sure we get the best people for the role. So if you're thinking about job descriptions, for example, thinking similar to what you might consider with accessing for customers, formatting of job descriptions, the accessibility, are people able to use screen readers or use assistive technology? If they prefer process things better verbally, is there an option to maybe talk over the phone as opposed to reading that? The language used, are you being concise and accurate with job descriptions? Obviously, job descriptions very, very well kind of all-rounded, looking for an all-rounded human being, and quite generalist and skills in there, not necessarily very specific to the role. So how do we be more precise and concise with that, really highlighting what the key things are of the role, and using really concise language to help people understand kind of what that entails. Assessments themselves, again, thinking about flexibility, there might be some challenges with kind of completing written assessments within time periods, processing kind of answers in that time, especially under time pressure, or doing it without breaks if there are challenges maybe with focusing for long periods. So how do you offer adjustments or flexibility in there? Or is there alternative ways of doing that assessment? Similar with interviews, the common question we get is, we don't want to share interview questions beforehand because we don't want to give one person an unfair advantage. I don't think that allowing someone to be able to answer the question the best way they can is going to give anyone an advantage. I think it's just allowing people to show what their skills are, instead of people feeling under pressure to do it on the spot. So offering things beforehand, offering kind of questions beforehand, being able to kind of prompt or rephrase questions where needed, to really help people kind of answer give the answer they need to. I think the end result is you're trying to create an environment where you can get the best person for the role. And I think creating flexibility in those questions as well is really important. Thinking then about onboarding, so I think linking back to the creating psychological safety, so we did with at the start, and helping people to feel encouraged to apply. Similar with onboarding, how do you outline and signpost what's available when people start? As Ian mentioned there as well, kind of then neurodiversity networks, support groups, what support's available, highlighting all that, what's available, help people see, I know where to go, I can proactively engage with that. I don't feel stress or pressure about disclosing. I don't feel worried about disclosing. I don't feel worried about how it's going to be perceived. I know it's a safe place for me to ask for that support. And even from a manager perspective or a recruitment perspective, how do you proactively have those conversations? Can you engage with people earlier and start that conversation sooner, instead of waiting for people to? I think for a lot of individuals, they often wait until they're in maybe in a bit of a crisis, if they don't feel comfortable disclosing. So can you help people feel comfortable in talking about that in the first place? Helps them be more confident, helps them be more productive. Everyone wins, really. It's not just for them, it's for everyone. And lastly, that continuous improvement. I think, Ian, you mentioned this as well, kind of the benefits of having that yearly survey. I think even for us, we talk about kind of what's best practice and what could be done best for recruitment, but you learn so much from those who've been through the process as well. So having that ongoing kind of gathering feedback from individuals who've gone through your recruitment process, seeing what you can do differently, having those neurodiversity networks can really offer such a good sounding board and give you so many options in terms of how you can make improvements. So I agree with what Ian said. I think it's a really good starting point, just to get yourself some understanding about what people are experiencing in your organisation and what you can do differently. So I hope that's been insightful in some ways in terms of what you could do differently in your roles in the recruitment. But yeah, happy to answer any other questions later as well.